So the next thing we need to do is we can add a query, a MySQL error statement in case this query does not execute, so we can get a message to know the reason why. So we can say if it's not query, then we can say die with query failed. Then we concatenate with the MySQL error statements, which takes the connection as its parameter. So in case there's an error with this query statement, we are going to be notified. Now the next thing we need to do is we only want to execute or get the data from the database if the form fields are not empty. That is, if this email form field or input field is not empty and this password input field is not empty. So what we are going to do is we're going to use the empty method for PHP. So we'll say if it's not empty, that is the email underscore login, and it's not empty as well, the pass underscore login. So we are going to write the code that we get the data from the database. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to validate the password that is being passed. I must make sure that the password being inputted meets the criteria. Though we might not even need to put the validation, because if the email is not found, it's going to throw an error. But for simplicity's sake, we could just add the password validation. So to do that, we can just copy the one we have inside the insert.php for password. So we copy this if statement here for the password, which checks if the password meets the regular expression. So we copy this, then we go to our login.php, then we can paste it here. So what we are doing is we are trying to validate the password, making sure that it meets the required criteria, which is contain at least one digit, at least one uppercase letter and one lowercase letter, and it must be between 7 and 15 characters. But even though if we don't do this, if the password is not found in the database, it will throw an error. But we're just putting this to just show how the validation also works. So we change this from pass underscore word to pass underscore login. We pass this. So we are checking if this password matches this regular expression. So if it does not, using this preg underscore match, we're going to show this error. Then the next thing that we need to do is we can also pass another error message, letting the user know that the password he or she inputted is not the same as the one they have in the database. So we can just copy this as well. Again, only this alert statement, then paste it down. So we can have this as error 1, can have this as error 1, have this as error 2. Let's remove this first one. Let's remove this first one. We can change this to password is incorrect. Password is incorrect. So if the user inputs a wrong password, it's going to get this message and also this alert message. Now the next thing is, what we want to do is, if the email is found in the database, we're going to use this count statement. So we're going to say if count is less than or equal to 0, that means if the count variable is not found, we show an error to the user. So we say if count is less than or equal to 0, then we can show an error to the user. We post this, we can call this error 3, and we'll change this to something like user does not, or user not found. We can say user not found. So this is the message if no email that matches this criteria is found. Else, if it does, then we need to loop through the database using the MySQLi fetch array. So it's going to loop through the data and fetch all the data that meets this where clause. So to do that, we use the where condition or the where state or the while statement. We say while, we create a variable called row and set it equal to MySQLi underscore fetch underscore array, passing in the query that we have here as its parameter. So now what this is going to do is, if there is a match inside the table, then it's going to fetch the data using this method, MySQLi fetch array. Then we are setting it equal to a variable called row, and then this MySQLi fetch array takes the parameter query, which is this query that we are sending to the database. Now what we want to do is we want to get all the data for the user. We can get the ID, we might use the ID later, so let's just get it. I will save it inside a session. Then we get the first name equal to row. We got the first name. So for this I paste for the last name. Then we get for the email, we get for, or we can call it user underscore email, which is equal to row. So with this we are fetching the user data from the database, and we need to note that these values we are passing in inside these quotes, they must correspond to what we have in the database. Here we are passing email, then we say user underscore password. We use 0 to fetch it with password. Then also we can get the activation key, because we might be using the activation key. So we just say activation underscore key, and we'll set it equal to the row fetching the data, activation underscore key. Now with this, if there's a match, then the user with this data, all this data will be retrieved from the database or will be fetched. Now after doing this, we need to do some check to see if this data that was fetched from the database is equal to what the user is inputting into the input form. So we'll do that in the next video.